Welcome back to the channel, my spooky friends. Tonight we delve into the echoing silence of abandoned warehouses, places where the mundane once thrived, now haunted by the unexplained. So dim the lights, turn up the volume, and prepare to be drawn into the darkness as we uncover three tales of unexplained phenomena in abandoned warehouses. Our first story takes us to the outskirts of Detroit, to a decaying warehouse, its windows like vacant eyes staring out from grime-streaked walls. It was once a bustling hub of industry, its floors alive with the clatter of machinery and the shouts of workers. Now, silence reigns, broken only by the scuttling of rats and the whisper of wind whistling through broken panes. For weeks, rumors had circulated among the few remaining employees about strange occurrences after dark. They spoke in hushed tones of fleeting shadows, seen from the corner of their eyes, darting behind pillars or vanishing down darkened corridors. They dismissed it as tricks of the light, their minds playing tricks on them in the unsettling quiet of the dying factory. One night, a group of workers stayed late, attempting to finish a rush order. The air hung heavy with the oppressive humidity of a summer night, the silence broken only by the hum of flickering fluorescent lights. As they worked, a sense of unease settled over them, a feeling of unseen eyes watching their every move. One of the men, a burly welder named Frank, paused from his work, wiping the sweat from his brow. He glanced up, his gaze drawn to the darkest corner of the warehouse, a place where the dying light barely reached. For a moment, he could have sworn he saw a figure standing there, its form shrouded in shadow, its eyes glowing like embers. He blinked and it was gone. Shaking his head, Frank tried to dismiss it as his imagination. But the feeling of dread lingered, a cold knot in his stomach. He shared his experience with the others, his voice low, his words hesitant. To his surprise, he wasn't met with ridicule. Instead, he was met with grim nods and shared experiences. One by one, the other workers recounted their own encounters with the shadowy figures. Each story was different, yet eerily similar. A fleeting glimpse of movement in the periphery, a feeling of being watched, of being followed. The more they talked, the more convinced they became that they were not alone in the abandoned warehouse. Determined to get to the bottom of the mystery, the men decided to investigate. Armed with nothing but flashlights and their waning courage, they cautiously made their way toward the darkest corners of the warehouse. The air grew colder as they ventured deeper, the silence pressing down on them like a physical weight. As they rounded a corner, a sudden noise sent shivers down their spines. It was a low growl, guttural and menacing, followed by the distinct sound of something heavy dragging across the concrete floor. Their flashlights danced across the darkness, but they revealed nothing. Panic began to set in. The men, their bravado crumbling in the face of the unknown, turned to flee. As they ran, they swore they could hear the sound of heavy footsteps pounding behind them, gaining on them with each terrifying step. They burst out of the warehouse doors and into the cool night air, their chests heaving, their hearts pounding in their ears. They didn't stop running until they reached the safety of their cars, their headlights cutting through the darkness like beacons of hope. The next day, the men returned to the warehouse, their faces pale, their eyes haunted by the events of the previous night. They gathered their tools and belongings, refusing to stay a moment longer than necessary. The warehouse stood silent, its secrets locked within its decaying walls. The shadowy figures remained, their true nature unknown, their presence a chilling reminder that some places are best left undisturbed. Our next story takes us to the desolate plains of West Texas, where an abandoned grain silo stands as a solitary sentinel against the vast emptiness. Once a symbol of prosperity, the silo now stands empty, its massive structure a haunting reminder of a bygone era. The locals whisper tales of strange occurrences within its rusted walls, of voices carried on the wind, and of a darkness that seems to consume all who dare to enter. The stories began soon after the silo was abandoned, fueled by the imaginations of children daring each other to spend a night within its echoing chambers. They returned with tales of whispers in the dead of night, of disembodied voices calling their names from the depths of the silo. As the years passed, the stories persisted, drawing the attention of those seeking to explain the unexplainable. Paranormal investigators, armed with EMF readers and audio recorders, flocked to the site, hoping to capture evidence of the strange phenomena. One such investigator, a man named Dr. Thomas Ashton, became obsessed with the silo and its secrets. He spent countless nights within its cavernous interior, his equipment capturing hours of eerie silence punctuated by unexplained noises. He documented sudden drops in temperature, the feeling of being watched, and the overwhelming sense of dread that permeated the very air.
One night, as I sat alone in the darkness, my headphones clamped tightly over my ears, listening to the live feed from my audio recorder, I heard it. A faint whisper, barely audible above the static, seemed to emanate from the very walls of the silo. It was a low, guttural sound, as if someone were speaking directly into my ear. I adjusted the settings on my recorder, amplifying the sound. The whisper grew louder, more distinct. It was a voice, raspy and ancient, speaking in a language I couldn't understand. I strained to make out the words, my heart pounding in my chest. Suddenly, the voice stopped. Silence descended once more, heavy and oppressive. I sat frozen in place, my blood running cold. I had spent years chasing the paranormal, but nothing had prepared me for this. I felt a primal fear grip me, a deep-seated terror that seemed to emanate from the very core of my being.
He gathered his equipment and fled the silo, the sound of his own footsteps echoing through the darkness like the footsteps of a pursuer. He never returned to the silo, his experience forever seared into his memory. The abandoned grain silo still stands on the Texas plains, a stark silhouette against the setting sun. The whispers remain, their source unknown, their purpose a mystery. Some believe they are the voices of the wind, playing tricks on the human mind. Others believe they are something more, something ancient and evil, trapped within the silo's rusted walls. Our story takes us to the fog-shrouded city of San Francisco, where an abandoned warehouse on the waterfront holds a dark secret. This isn't just a story of shadows or whispers, this is a story of objects moving on their own, of a building that seemed to pulsate with a life of its own. The warehouse, a hulking structure of brick and steel, had once been a bustling hub of maritime trade. Now it stood silent, its windows boarded up, its doors chained and padlocked. But behind its facade of decay something was stirring. The first sign was the cold. Workers in neighboring buildings complained of a sudden chill, a bone-deep cold that seemed to emanate from the abandoned warehouse next door. Then came the reports of strange occurrences within the warehouse itself. Security guards on their rounds swore they saw objects moving, shifting positions as if guided by unseen hands. One guard, a young man named Miguel, described his encounter with chilling detail. He had been making his rounds, his flashlight beam cutting through the darkness, when he noticed something odd. A stack of crates, untouched for years, had shifted. One of the crates, heavy with unknown contents, lay on its side, as if it had been pushed over. He approached cautiously, his heart pounding in his chest. As he drew closer, he felt a cold spot settle over him, a sudden drop in temperature that sent shivers down his spine. Terrified, Miguel fled the warehouse, the image of the moving crate seared into his memory. As the days turned into weeks, the strange occurrences continued. Objects moved on their own, doors slammed shut seemingly of their own volition, and the temperature fluctuated wildly, from sweltering heat to bone-chilling cold. The warehouse, it seemed, was breathing. Word of the haunted warehouse spread throughout the city, attracting the attention of a group of paranormal investigators. They arrived armed with an arsenal of equipment, determined to capture evidence of the unexplained. They set up cameras, EMF readers, and temperature gauges, their every move recorded for posterity. As they ventured deeper into the warehouse, they were met with an overwhelming sense of dread. The air grew thick with the feeling of unseen eyes watching their every move, and the temperature plummeted, their breath forming icy clouds in the still air. Suddenly, the warehouse seemed to come alive. Objects began to move around them. Crates toppled over and tools clattered to the floor. The investigators watched in astonishment as a heavy metal door swung open with a deafening clang, revealing a dark and foreboding corridor beyond. One of the investigators, a seasoned ghost hunter named Sarah, stepped forward, her camera raised. "Show yourself," she whispered into the darkness. A cold wind swept through the warehouse, extinguishing their lanterns and plunging them into darkness. Sarah stumbled backward, her heart pounding in her chest. She could hear the sound of heavy footsteps approaching, slow and deliberate, coming from the darkness beyond the open door. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, it stopped. The investigators, shaken but unharmed, gathered their equipment and retreated from the warehouse, their cameras filled with hours of unexplainable footage. The abandoned warehouse on the San Francisco waterfront remains a mystery to this day. Whatever the explanation, one thing is certain. The warehouse is a place of power, a place where the veil between our world and the next is thin. Thank you for joining us tonight, brave souls, as we explored the chilling mysteries of abandoned warehouses. The echoes of unexplained phenomena linger, a reminder that some places hold secrets best left undisturbed. Until next time, sleep tight and remember, sometimes the most terrifying monsters are the ones we can't explain.